for the
All right.
thing. All right, we're live. We're
What
live.
episode are we on?
Episode
What episode
90.
are we on?
It's on the Notion document.
90? Yep. Episode 90. Notion. So this is kind of cool. So this is like a
It's
little
everything.
shared. Is it a shared
Yeah.
what document?
It's just a
Yeah.
shared document. But Notion is, you've used Notion, haven't you?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
We've used it
really?
one time before, I think. Yeah.
I would not want to be a developer working on this project because you can literally use Notion for everything. Like you can build databases with it. You can build
What?
to-do lists. You can build like all of this stuff. It's crazy. Like it's just this thing that's like a Swiss Army knife for everything.
Is it like
Like you can
open
build
table?
like an
Not
open
open
table.
table. Air tables? Air tables.
I don't know, maybe. But you can do all kinds of crazy things. Like you just do notes and write documents, but you can put to-do lists in it. You can make a knowledge base, like a wiki with it. You can use it for tasks and projects. You can use it as a Jira or a um, what's the other thing called? Uh, Trello.
Kanban?
Like yeah, you could use it for Kanban boards. You can use it as a
Yeah.
lightweight CRM, so it will do like databases and spreadsheets and calendars, and it's
Yeah, that
like
sounds
it's
very much
real
like
trippy.
Airtable.
Yeah, okay. I've
I've
never
never
heard of
used
Airtable
Airtable either, though. So,
either.
so
Airtable.
it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Hey,
All in all.
in any case,
Mm.
hey everybody! Thanks so much for tuning into episode 90. I'm not sure where Michael's going to put that discussion about Notion and Airtable. If you're using either one of these, I'd be interested to hear how you're using them. By the way, but we've got a lot of good stuff for you here today. We've got some packages, we have some releases, we have some general news from the Laravel community, and we are going to share all of it with you right here today. So thanks so much
Yeah.
for joining us. Okay, so before the show started, we talked about this very first one. So let's start with packages. Let's dive right into it. We're talking about on the fly hash IDs with the Eloquent hash IDs package. So let me introduce this real quick, kind of talk about what it is, and then we can discuss kind of the merits of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound good?
Sounds
Okay.
good.
So first of all, what are hash IDs? Michael, give me your very plain Aussie English version of what hash IDs are.
Yeah. Hash IDs are essentially a way for you to be able to obfuscate your auto incrementing IDs without going to the extreme of using UIDs. So, where you don't want to reveal the IDs of your underlying models in your query parameters and your URLs, or if you want to hide the number of customers you've got and things like that, a hash ID is essentially a computation that you can perform on a number. So you give it the number 1 or the number 10, and it will return you a reversible hash, a reversible string, which is encrypted. Takes the number 1 and makes sure that number 1 will always return the string ABC 123, and then you can always reverse that. So if you give it ABC 123, then it'll reverse that and give you back the number 1.
And this is handy because like if you do like Laravel like encrypt or decrypt or whatever, you get this really long string, right?
Yeah,
And hash IDs makes this like you can make. I think you can actually set the length that you'd
yeah,
like it to be. So
yeah.
you can say, hey, I really want only like a 6-character hash that I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
for. 6 characters really is 6 times. Let's see. There are 26 letters in the alphabet. There are 10 numerals, so that's 36. So it's 36 times 36. What's yeah, 36
It's
times
a big number.
36 times 36. Yeah, it's billions, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Sorry, I'm gonna do it real quick. Times 36. Yeah. Okay. One, two, three, four. Yeah. So you've got 2 billion combinations. Um, if you just use that's just lowercase alpha numeric, right?
Yeah.
If you use case insensitive or like case sensitive, uppercase and lowercase instead of 36, you now have another 26 on top of that, right? It gets big quick. So that's kind of the idea behind hash IDs. So they're really nice to work with. Again, kind of like obfuscate your IDs for your models, which is wonderful. And so a lot of times the way that you do this is you will store these values in your database. But this Eloquent Hash IDs package makes it so that you can do this really easy on the fly. So it adds hash IDs to Laravel Eloquent models by encoding or decoding them on the fly rather than persisting them in the database. So you don't need another database column or it says, and you also have higher performance by using primary keys in your queries. So instead of using your hash IDs, you're using your actual primary keys.
Mhm.
So this is it provides you a simple to use interface here, a really nice API. You just use these two traits, has hash ID and then hash ID routing, and then it will go ahead and do a lot of that for you in the background without you having to do much of that. So it gives the code examples for you at the bottom. And I think the question that we had before was, why would you not store them? Or
Mhm.
you said to me, well, why would you store them in the first place? Right.
Yeah.
And for me, I think the answer is I want to be able to look up a database record based solely on the hash ID. Like I don't want to have to involve the application to
Yeah.
get that. So like if I have a hash ID that somebody sends me in an email and says, "Hey, I got this link. I'm not sure exactly what's happening." I want to be able to go grab that hash ID off there and go look it up in my database table.
Mhm.
If you don't store them on the database, you have to get the program, the application itself involved in order to be able to look that up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Yeah. So in your case, have you used hash IDs a whole lot in the past? I
Yeah.
think typically,
Yeah. I've got one or two applications out there that do use it, and like I get your point that for a developer ergonomics point of view, you would store the hash
yeah,
IDs
sure.
so that if someone sends you a link, then you can go and find it.
Right, right.
Um, I guess my argument, this is the same kind of thing as storing UUIDs as binary in the database as opposed to storing the string. I
Yes, that's a good point.
it's more about preferring efficiency in the database, right? As opposed
Yeah,
to being able, because then you wouldn't store both. You wouldn't store it as binary and then as the string representation, you would just store it as binary in the UUID
right.
case. And likewise with the hash IDs, that means that you're not storing the ID and the reversible string, like the encrypted string, because the only reason you're storing the string in the database really is so that you can look it up, and that's because you
Right.
don't want to
That's
fire
correct.
up
Yeah,
Tinker and find out
totally.
what the ID is and things like that. So I mean, it comes down to how often you're actually doing it. If you're only doing it once every week or once every month, then no, don't store the hash ID string in the database because it kind of defeats the purpose of using this reversible um, encrypted value anyway. So, no, it's up to you. It's per application.
Yeah. For me, it's like SQL Pro or Table Plus are like the OG Nova, right? I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love Nova. I use it on almost every project, but
Yeah.
there are a lot of things I use Nova for, and there are other things I use the database for. Like I'll just jump into SQL Pro and go grab some stuff, or whatever.
Mm.
So I'm in the database all the time through SQL Pro or Table Plus running queries and stuff. So yeah, for me it totally makes sense to store it in there, and I think it's just like a comfort thing for me. Um,
Mm.
it's a safety blanket, right? Interesting. I've never really stored UUIDs as binary before, but that's a great comparison. So
Yeah.
there you have it. There's on the fly hash IDs with the Eloquent hash IDs package, and I don't even think we talked about the author or anything. So it's Mohammed Ali Tavasoli. So he is the one who created this. Thanks so much, Mohammed.
Yeah.
Okay, what else we got here? We got Laravel Web Tinker. Why don't you tell us about that?
Laravel Web Tinker is a package from Spassy for running the Laravel Tinker read the REPL, so the read eval print loop environment in your browser. So many of us would be familiar with Tinker. We'd probably use it in our applications a lot in terms of going in and querying models and running once-off queries and things like that. The Tinker command is obviously a great way to tinker with your application in the terminal. Um, the package that we're talking about here from Sparsy, the WebTinker package, basically gives you a way to route to your application from the URL from the browser. Now, it's a little dodgy. I certainly wouldn't be
Right.
deploying this to production in
Ever.
like
Yeah.
even if you think you're going to put it behind auth. I wouldn't want to run the risk of
No.
being able to access Tinker and essentially do anything in your application from the browser like that. Um, But for development, if you're already in the browser testing stuff, then yeah, go for it. I wouldn't see any issues with it. Um, I don't really use it myself. I'm usually in the terminal anyway, so flicking over to a Tinker terminal um, is easy enough when you're already in there anyway. But if wanting to use Tinker in the browser is something that you're interested in, then definitely check this package out. We'll have the link in the show notes.
Yeah. One of the and they do warn against saying like, hey, do not put this in production. Never,
Yeah,
never, never put this in production. But one of the main things that they mentioned here as a benefit was the ability to run multi-line commands. So you ever have that in Tinker where you're trying to like do,
yeah,
hey, I have to like go grab, this record, this model, and then I
yeah,
have to go do this, and then I have to do this. And you have to enter each one as like a single line. Well,
yeah.
with this, you can kind of enter almost like a little script, right, and then run it all at once, and
Hmm.
that'll handle that. So that's interesting. But yeah, if that's something you're interested in, definitely check that out. Thanks,
Hmm.
Spasi.
Yeah.
And don't forget to send a postcard. Do not forget to send
Yes.
a postcard.
Do not forget.
There is a special list at the North Pole called the Naughty List for all of you who ever use Spasi stuff that don't send a postcard.
Yep.
I am on that list.
I'm definitely on
So
that list. I was going to bring a whole
yes,
bunch of them with me to New York to give to Freek, but I forgot.
save on
So,
postage. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
My bad. My bad.
Sorry, Frank. Okay, so the next thing we have is this Laravel custom casts package. This is super cool, by the way. So you've probably used this before in your models where you have a protected casts attribute property, and then you set key value, key value, key value, key value, right? So like, for example, you would say something like, um, I want payload to be cast to a object, or I want payload to be cast to JSON, or payload to be cast to array, or something like that. Or you can even do, they have this special thing that they've done now. I think it's you put in date and then colon and then the actual format that you
Yeah.
want to do when you cast it, right? So if you
Hmm.
say, hey, I actually have birth date, but I always want to display that in month, day, year,
Yep.
you can say birthday arrow, fat arrow, date colon MDY or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Big M, little d, comma, big Y. Oh my word. Isn't that sad? I hate having to remember all those things. It's so annoying, but we
Yeah.
do. We do. Okay. But this is really neat because it basically gives you the ability to take any column and cast it to a custom object. So you can do exactly that, right? So it works similarly to Laravel attribute casting, but with our custom logic defined in a separate class. Besides casting to our complex types, this package gives us the ability to listen and react to underlying model events. So it shows you really simply, again, just a trait. You just add a trait called has custom casts, and then you add your special little class that you're going to do. Now, this custom class that you're going to cast to must extend a custom cast base. And then what you have is you have a set attribute and a cast attribute. And then in this case, it says get title. So this is just a protected function that's on here, right? So there's some additional instructions in here. I think you get the idea without me going into too much of the code heaviness of it.
Yeah.
The ability to take a column and cast it to a custom class. Pretty neat. And this one comes from Vladimir Kovic,
Nice.
something like that. Vladimir. Yeah, so it looks really good. I'm definitely going to be giving this one a try. Thanks very much, Vladimir. Looks awesome.
Yeah. Next up,
Okay.
we've got the
Yep.
Laravel Helios package by Gunter de Brouwer, which exposes the authorization logic of your REST API using Helios links. For those of you that aren't familiar with Helios, it basically allows you to expose the authorization logic of your REST API, and this package will make it easy for you to add those links to your API resources. The package defines an artisan command for creating a new Helios class, which contains methods that will generate links in your JSON responses. So it gives you a self link, a delete link, and so on and so forth. And then in your Laravel resource class, you can include the links using the package's has links trait, and that will give you another key. So you put in an underscore links key and just return this links, and that will then put in all of the self link, so the link back to that resource, and a delete link. And if you want to add and edit like a patch or report or whatever to update that thing as well. If you're not familiar with Helios, it basically stands for Hypermedia as the engine of application state, which you can get a pretty good overview of from the Wikipedia entry, which we'll include in the show notes. But you can learn more about this package and get the full installation and instructions. Check the source code out on GitHub. We'll have the link in the show notes. Thanks again to Gunter de Brouwer.
Yeah, I've never had to set this up, but just from hearing a short description of it, I can tell it's one of those things that's really kind of a large pain to do.
It's more
And I know that,
repetition than anything else. It's just having to
yeah,
put all of
sure.
that stuff in over and over and over again. So especially if you've got a lot of resources in your application. So being able to do it in an automated way is nice. I think I saw Frake actually the other day say they're putting together a similar package, not for Helios, but to put all of the authorization based links like creating and viewing and adding and editing stuff for Inertia.js, and to basically automatically fill those fields and return them with your resources to your front end, so to your JSON or to your JavaScript.
Yeah, that'd be pretty handy. And I think the thing is, like, you would still be protected on the server side.
Correct. Yeah.
But
It will only
it's
show you
always
the
that
links
thing
that
where,
you're
like,
authorized for.
yeah, exactly. You're right. It's nice for the client side to know so that you can only show the items that you actually are authorized for. Right. Yeah. So Nova does this, right? Nova does this for you already, where
Yeah.
you have, like, if you have a policy for a model and the person who's viewing it doesn't have edit ability, right? The little pencil icon does not show up on that
Yeah.
records row in Nova, which I remember when they first showed that on stage, I was like, no way. No way. And then it happened. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because that's like a big pain, right? It's a big pain. So it's one of
Yeah.
those things that that Nova solves for you, but it looks like that Frake and those guys are going to be working on too. So
Yep.
I know TJ Miller too said that he's had to do this a couple times, and he was like, "I'm super glad to see somebody else has built a package to do
Yeah.
this," which
It's a
he said
fairly
he would
common
use.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So there's that. The next thing we had is Laravel Scout array driver for testing. So Laravel Scout was introduced. Let's see. I know it was in Louisville, but Laravel Scout is essentially it's a really good search engine, right, for your resources. So it's a full text search. It's usually powered by, or at least when it was very first out, it was powered by Algolia, right? And so I think that's still sort of like first class,
Yeah.
support for Algolia. You can also use Elasticache and Elasticsearch or something like that.
Yeah.
For other drivers. But now there's a new array driver. So this package adds an array driver to Laravel Scout, which provides custom PHP unit assertions to make testing search-related functionality easier. This is really handy, very cool. So the package ships with a search facade, which provides convenience methods that make asserting search easier. So again, I've learned this mistake multiple times before. Please don't read code on air. I'm not going to. But it has a bunch of methods you should check out, which are in the README. One of them that kind of stands out is the fake record method. So this method allows you to fake the search index record of the model. So you can say, hey, go ahead, when you search fake record, whatever, this is the value you should return. So when you call user search where ID equals 123, whatever, it will return that particular row, right? So it makes testing this stuff a whole lot easier, and we certainly all love that. So that came from Stiebas, Stiebas on Twitter, looks like. STI3BAS. Let me see if there's an actual name on this one. Laurianus from Lithuania. Sorry. Lauryanas. Laurianus. Is that how you say that?
Yep. Laurianus. That's a curveball even for me.
Yeah. And I've still got this cough. How many weeks has this been?
It has been like
forever.
a month. And seriously, that's the
It's
worst
gonna kill
part
me.
of having a cold, is just that lingering cough that's always there.
Oh my gosh.
And it feels like it's there forever, and then it becomes part of your being, and then one day
Yep.
it just goes away. And then
It's
you're
impossible.
like, and then you don't even remember how long you had it for. So
Yep. That's totally true. Anyway, so Laravel Scout array driver for testing. There you go. Alrighty. What's up next?
Laravel Cashier Molly V1 is now available. So you might remember that we spoke a while ago. We had him on the show, Sander van Hooft, talking about cashier for Molly and why this is an important inclusion for folks primarily in the EU around a lot of the specifics for payments in the EU around the ability of being able to do bank transfers and things like that because credit cards are not as common over there. So we wrote and spoke about subscription billing with Cashier for Molly a while back during the very early stages of development. But as of the 3rd of September, so little over a week ago, Laravel Cashier for Molly has officially released their version 1.0. It's a first-party Laravel Cashier package that's created and maintained by Sander van Hooft and provides an expressive, fluent interface to subscriptions using Molly's billing services. The package, as I said, is a massive win for those working with European customers. Obviously, you can learn more about the package, get the installation instructions, and check out the source code on GitHub, which we will link to in the show notes. But it's really simple to get up and running. All of the methods are very familiar if you've ever used Cashier in the past. So congratulations to Sander and also to Laravel team for getting this out and into the world.
Awesome. Yeah. Wow. That's a ton of work, huh? So
Yep.
yeah, big
Billing is
shout out
one
to
thing
those
that I
guys.
don't envy anyone having to work with.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. So yeah, this is a lot of work made available for free. So hopefully it brings a lot of joy and happiness to a lot of developers. I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got Laravel releases now we're going to jump into. So we are on 5.8.33. There's some really, really good stuff in here. Before we even get to 6, we are on 5.8.33 and some awesome stuff in here. So first up is this new past validation that will fire after validation is passed. So form requests are a concept that are used a lot of time to handle all the validation for a particular form request coming in. So in your controller, for example, the first thing that you typically type in the method there is the request. So you say request and then you say request, right? $request. Well, what you can do is you can replace that request with a custom form request, like which you might name something like store new user request, right? And then what you can do is instead of having your validation inline in your controller method there, you have a rules method in the form request that you can then set up all your rules in there, right? You can also do a lot of other work in there. And this is one of those things that you can do in there, right? So once validation has passed, you now have this past validation method that you can use. And you can use this to apply filters to data. It basically allows you to do anything you want post validation before it goes to your controller, right?
Mm.
So the example they have here is, if the name is, I don't know. If they say basically just this replace name equals Adam. So when you're in a form request, this is actually just referring to the request itself. So you just say the request replace, and then you can modify the request however you'd
So I
like.
have a good
This is
example
super
for
cool.
this.
Yeah, let's hear it because
Because
I've
I
needed this
was,
a million times.
I was literally, I wrote a message into the Cash Money co-work last night because I'm like, how do I do this again? So if I'd read this article, I would have known about this. Basically, what I want to do is sometimes we get in some values in a request that we don't necessarily care about. We want to discard them, or we want to append something, or we want to change the value. Like we might get an ID and we might want to add the corresponding name. What I was doing is I needed some way of determining if I had a duplicate submission. So I'm doing a competition website for a client at the moment, and what I want to do is essentially fingerprint the entry that comes in. So I take a whole bunch of the fields that were passed in and then I generate a hash of those fields to determine the fingerprint. And then I can basically say, if I receive another submission that has this exact same fingerprint, then I need to reject it as a duplicate. So in order to save that fingerprint, what I was doing currently and what I'm going to change it to now that I've read this is I was basically going in the submission model. I was saying, when we're creating, so in my boot method, I had a creating listener, and I basically take all the values and then generate the hash, and then add that as another field. So I suppose I can do it in the request here as well, which is another way of doing it. But basically taking the request and appending to it, or replacing values in that request, or merging new values into the request once the
Yep.
validation has passed, because you don't want to make changes to the data coming in, because that may affect the outcome of the validation. So doing it after the validation has finished, which I guess previously you could have done in the with validator method, but the past validation probably makes sense because the with validator method is still typically within the context of the validation still happening. So the initial rules have passed, but then you're doing some additional, more complicated stuff. That's like, okay, once we do the initial validation that the required fields are there and that, any links out to foreign keyed tables and things like that, all of that is passed. And then you might do some additional checks. This is now like all of those checks have passed, and now we're ready to like manipulate the request and send it on to the next thing in the pipe.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like people have probably done this before, but that wasn't like a really super clean way to do it, right? So now
Yeah.
it's like a supported method past validation. So that's where you can do that now.
Yeah.
The other thing that was in this release was Dries Vince implemented new types for email validation support. So did you know that the .com on the end of an email address technically is not like required? So if you ever put in, I believe this was it was like in an RFC, right? It was like, hey, this is how it works. So you could have like Jake at Gmail, and like I think Laravel would say, yep, looks good.
Yeah.
Totally fine. So that has caused problems for some people. And so I think this is maybe a response to that. So it's using this email validator package that's now going to be pulled into the framework. What were you going to say?
Yeah. I mean, even if you're doing internal validation, like you can have a Michael at localhost is a perfectly valid email address.
Oh, there you go.
If you're only sending mail within the same server and you've got users on the same server. So this actually bit me recently because technically an email address with a space in it is valid. And sometimes we would have customers that would put like my name space at gmail.com. Now, whilst the email address doesn't actually exist, right?
Sure.
My name space at gmail.com is a valid email address according to the RFC. So with this additional validation that we've got here, you can actually say that you need to do, I think DNS is the one. There's one of the options for the validator package will actually make, I don't know if it was the validation package or if it was something else that I was testing. Because the RFC certainly makes compliant. Strict is a little bit different. I think the old email validation method, which was just a filter var, that would actually reject it. And when this changed, we updated a framework. We didn't catch it as part of the upgrade because we just did a composer update and all the tests.
Right.
So we didn't.
Yeah, exactly. It's not one of those things you're going to test. Like if they have put a space in their email address.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I said, well, technically it's valid. So there's RFC validation. You can do DNS checks. You can do a spoof check, which does...
Yeah, there's 5 of them right now: RFC, strict, DNS, spoof, and filter. And the documentation has been updated to include the new parameters that are possible. So the way that you do it is you say request validate, and then email is the key that we're looking at. And then as the value, you say email, which is normally what you do. You'd say like required bar email. But now you can say colon, and then you can pass in the different types of rules that you want it to match. So you can say match RFC, comma, match DNS, comma, match strict, whatever. So it'll pass through all of those sort of those rules, right?
Yeah.
So there's new Laravel validation, or there's new documentation for these in the Laravel validation documentation for 5.8.
Yeah. And the default now is RFC. So as long as the email address is RFC compliant, it will pass. And this is where we fell over because the old one, which is the filter, which you can still use if you want to maintain the behavior you had before this update, filter will fail the example with a space in it, whereas the RFC will allow it to pass. So as you said, there's RFC, there's strict, there's DNS, there's spoof, and there's filter, which is the pre-Laravel 5.8.33 validation method.
There you go. Dries also added support for Redis 5.0 in a backwards compatible way, so you can now support version 5.0 starting in this release. Next, insert ignore support was added for MySQL and Postgres. To learn more about that, you can look at pull request 29639, which what it does is the way ignore works during insert is that if the database runs into errors, it aborts and doesn't insert any rows. With ignore, the database will insert valid rows and ignore invalid data. So that's interesting. The last new feature added is the ability to use a custom whoops handler. I wonder why that would
Wonder
be.
why.
Why
Wonder
would
why.
that be? Yeah, we might talk about that a little bit later. So you can see the full list of fixes in the change log, but that's most of the highlights for you there.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, moving on.
The
You want to talk
new
about,
Laravel website.
yeah, you want to talk about the
Yeah.
next two there?
Yeah, so the new Laravel website is live. A few weeks ago in Taylor's, well, a few weeks ago, it was about a month ago now, I guess, a little bit more than a month ago at Taylor's Laracon US keynote, he announced Laravel 6, the new logo, the new branding, and the new website that was in the works. As of the 20th of August, the website is now live and you can check it out at laravel.com. The new design was created by Focus Lab, and if you know the Laravel history, they actually designed the first ever Laracon website and the monster illustrations that went on the t-shirts, which you've got one of those, Jake? You went to the first one in Washington? Or was it
I
New
did not
York?
go to the first one. I
You
was
didn't
at
go
the
to the first
second one. So I
one?
was
Okay.
in the first one that was in New York City, missed
Okay.
Washington. Yeah, Bill
Yeah.
Kondo though, our good friend
Yeah.
Bill Kondo, he was there.
Yeah. The website itself is open source, so if you do spot any issues with the website, feel free to open a pull request and contribute your fixes to GitHub. Um, so that's for the docs and the website itself. Speaking of websites, we've all
Speaking of
been
websites,
speaking of websites, we've all been in a situation where we've had a great idea for a new website and we wanted to purchase a domain for that website to make sure that even though we inevitably don't build that website, we've got the domain and no one else can take it away from us. So this week sponsoring the episode, we have instantdomains.com. It's a new domain name search tool built entirely on the Laravel framework and is an instant domain search tool, and we're talking like milliseconds instant.
super fast.
It allows you to search over 800 different domain extensions instantly. It has a domain name generator that gives specific results for 55 different industries and niches. The tool works in 32 different languages, has a clean, user-friendly UI, making it quick and easy to find available domains. So it'll give you links to premium domains. If you're serious about your business, you can get a premium domain name. The generator is really cool because you can just start typing in something like programming, and then it will return to you. Do you want programmingabout.com? It's a free domain. Programming Ace, well, someone owns that, but you can check out the who is straight away. You've got literally dozens and dozens, maybe even 100 results here for different domains that could be available or that are available for you to buy. You can filter this by industry. You can filter it by extension. You can filter it by how many characters are in the domain. So you can even look for domains that are available. So let's say we want to register a new company called rackdev.com. Well, you can buy that domain for just $2,995.
There you go.
So if you're serious about domains, be sure to check out instantdomains.com. As I said, they're built entirely on the Laravel framework, which I think is a first for domains.
Yeah.
So thanks very much to Instant Domains for sponsoring Laravel News.
Awesome. Okay. Next we have, yep, you said Laravel 6 is now released, so we're good on that. So the next thing we're talking about here is Ignition. No. Did
I
you
said the
just skip?
Laravel website is released. Let's
Oh,
talk
hit
about
it. You
Laravel
go.
6.
You go. Go
The
ahead.
Laravel team, as of September the 3rd, is proud to announce the release of Laravel 6 that is now available for everyone in its official release. So you've been able to pull in the master for a little while, but this release marks the start of Laravel framework taking up semantic versioning. This release also includes compatibility for Laravel Vapor, which Jake would love to talk to you about soon. It improves authorization responses, adds job middleware, lazy collections, subquery improvements, which we'll talk about a little bit later on as well, among many, many other improvements. Here are just some of the new features. So Laravel 6 is actually an LTS release. It supersedes the previous LTS release 5.5, and it will receive bug fixes until September 3rd, 2021, and security fixes until September 3rd, 2022. Security fixes for Laravel 5.5 did actually end on the 30th of August, so be sure to upgrade your applications if you are living the LTS trap life.
Oh my.
The Laravel release notes clarify semantic versioning going forward in Laravel 6 and beyond. So previously we had the paradigm major minor versioning system. We're now following semantic versioning. The package, the framework package itself, so that's the Laravel /framework package, will now follow semantic versioning standard. which makes the framework consistent with other first-party Laravel packages which already followed the versioning standard. The Laravel release cycle will remain unchanged. So if you go to the github.com/Laravel/Laravel repository, which is the main application skeleton, that isn't following semantic versioning. It's the underlying framework itself and the components and the first-party packages. So that basically means if there's any major breaking changes, we'll get a bump to the first number in the versioning system. If there's any deprecations or additions that are being made in a backwards compatible friendly way, they'll go into a minor, which is the second number, and any patches and bug fixes will go into the third number. So that's how the incrementing will happen from now on. There's also improved authorization responses. So previously it was difficult to provide custom error messages around authorization to end users. Laravel 6 introduces a gate inspect method which provides the authorization policy as response. So if you were to inspect a view authorization gate on a flight model, if the response is allowed, the user is authorized to view the flight. However, if the response is denied, you are now able to respond with the message itself, and you can check on that and do whatever you need to do based on that. Job middleware is a feature that is contributed by Taylor Otwell, which allows jobs to run through middleware. So if you've got, and we've spoken about this on a previous episode, so we'll just touch on it really lightly here, but essentially you can provide some middleware to a job class, and then when you dispatch a job, you can say job, dispatch through, and then an array of the middleware, so you can do whatever you need to do before the job actually executes. This will help you to avoid custom logic in the body of your job's handle method, which actually makes it really clear because I wasn't sure when you might use the middleware. But being able to really trim down the handle method in the job to just do the actual job stuff and then all the custom logic you could do beforehand. So that's a nice little touch. Lazy collections are a real game changer when you're working with extensive collections of data, including eloquent models. So a new Illuminate support lazy collection class leverages PHP's generator to keep memory low while working with large data sets. Be sure to check out the lazy collections documentation for more. This is really handy if you're going through massive, we're talking thousands, tens of thousands of records. Rather than loading everything into memory all at once, it will go through line by line. If you're processing a text file or a CSV file, it'll go record by record using a cursor, for example, if you're hitting a database. So definitely check that out, especially if you're going over huge data sets with your collections. As I said, the docs and further information will be in the show notes. We'll speak more specifically about the eloquent subquery enhancements, but Jonathan Rennick has contributed some of these. He's written a separate article about it, which we will link up in the show notes and speak about a bit later on. And of course, be sure to check out Jonathan's excellent talk from Laracon US this year, where he goes into a bit of detail about using subqueries and other techniques, as well as his upcoming Eloquent Performance Patterns course. And if you've used Laravel 6 so far, you may have noticed that the front-end presets are no longer included. So you get a Laravel application that just has a welcome page. There's no more view, there's no more bootstrap included. It's all in a separate package now in the Laravel UI Composer package, which allows first-party UI scaffolding to be iterated on a separately from the primary framework. So that means that we can make changes to the views separately to Laravel itself. It also means that we can add things like Tailwind components
presets,
and presets for Tailwind and for Bulma and for Semantic UI and for whatever else. They'll all be able to be done separately rather than having to constantly update the main Laravel skeleton application. If you do want the traditional Bootstrap view scaffolding that used to come out of the box up until version 6, you just run composer require Laravel/UI and then PHP artisan UI view -- auth and off you go. Obviously, you can learn more by checking out the show notes, the release notes, the upgrade guide, and the contribution guide will all be linked there for you to check out.
Laravel, new, my app. That's all you need to know, right?
Yep.
Check it out for Laravel 6. That's all you really got to do if you have the installer installed. Laravel new, my app, and there you go. You can check out Laravel 6 in all of its glory. It's pretty cool. So this is like a big announcement. It's like, boom, Laravel 6, like here it is. But the thing is, it's not going to be Laravel 6 for all that long, really,
Yeah.
right? I
Well,
mean, like it's going to be Laravel 7 for too long, but this kind of marks like the big change, right? And I think
yeah.
Taylor kind of just wanted to make a statement where he's like, we're looking at 5. We've been on 5 for a while now, and I don't really see things shifting massively away from kind of where we've been, where that's kind of what it's been in the past. Like when you would go from version 3 to version 4, from version 4 to version 5, right? It was like this large, almost paradigm shift of like, okay, this is going to be a big change here, right?
Yeah.
And so now he's basically gotten to the point where he's like, I'm really comfortable and happy with the framework. We're going to make the switch. This is kind of the stamp of approval to say we are really happy with the framework as it is. Laravel 6 is like the new, and then it's going to be, obviously, because we're following semantic versioning, we're going to be going up relatively quickly from here. So it's all great. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
And the link for the next thing is broken. So I'm going to try and find that real quick here. One second. Laravel news.com. This is my Eric Barnes.
It's real bad.
Where it's always bad. There it is. There it is. Ignition. Okay. Ignition. So Ignition is the new error page for Laravel. So as part of Laracon EU 2019, Freek van der Herten and Marcel Posiat announced their latest open source package, Ignition. So Marcel said, this is the only package I've worked for 9 months full time, I think is what he said, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this thing has been brewing for quite some time. So Ignition is the new default error page for Laravel 6. As you recall, Whoops was the big new hotness a while ago. It's still an amazing tool, and actually Ignition is built on top of Whoops. But what it does is it has some beautiful Laravel-specific features that should make debugging exceptions and stack traces significantly better. So you might even, they go as far as to say, you might even enjoy throwing an exception on purpose to see this beautiful new debugging stack for Laravel. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it is pretty sweet. So Freek's got a detailed write-up announcing Ignition. He mentions how Ignition can do some interesting framework-specific things and make the stack traces easier to digest, such as it has the functionality to display the uncompiled view path and your blade view. So you've probably run into this before where it'll say, trying to get property of non-object. You're trying to get an email off something, right? And then you go and it looks and it shows you the compiled view that it created. And so now you have to go kind of dig through and figure out which compiled view is that. Where do I find that? You have to go look through your, it's your storage directory to find that compiled view and then go determine which it is, right? Okay. So because this Ignition is made specifically for Laravel, they're aware of that issue, and so they solve it for you. So they only display the applications, they say like, hey, here's where it actually is. Here's that blade file that this is referencing. In addition, the frames of the exceptions, of the application frames of the exceptions, those are the only ones that you're probably interested in. So those are the only ones that they show. So it really cleans up that view that you get. So instead of a stack trace of like, 1,000 different items, it just says, here are the ones you're probably interested in. There's a screenshot provided here, and it shows multiple tabs with helpful hints about the request, the framework, the user that's actually experiencing the error, the context, the debug. And then the really neat thing about this is you can actually add onto that, right? So there is the ability to create custom, I don't even know what they're calling them, plugins?
Yeah, plugins.
Yeah, for this, so that you can get additional information off this. I know that like Laracasts is one of the ones that somebody built. So they said like, hey, this will just automatically determine if there's something out there on Laracasts that might be relevant for you. If you're having a hard time solving this one, go over and take a look at Laracasts. It will do that for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the debug tab has a cool feature of showing queries, logs, and dumps. So when a dump occurs, so you DD, Ignition displays the file name where the dump statement happened. No more searching for the missing DD call in a vendor package. How many times has that happened?
Yeah.
It's never happened to me in a vendor package. It has happened to me plenty of other times, though. So the other cool thing that it does is, apart from the debug information, it tries to go the extra step in making suggestions for common problems that you might experience. For example, a class or a view path typo. It tries to provide suggested solutions. It'll say, hey, you actually didn't run Composer install or Composer update for this yet. It will say, hey, we found a triple left arrow. It looks like you have a bad merge conflict, right? So there's all sorts of really, really interesting suggestions. And of course, these are community sourced. So if you have one that you'd like to add in, you can PR that to facade/ignition on GitHub. Thanks so much to this team for creating this. This is going to be incredible. Really excited. And I think that we would maybe be amiss if we did not at least mention that along with Ignition, they also released their own custom error tracking tool called Flare, which is basically a what I don't even know how to say it. It kind of like
It's like a Laravel
it does
specific error tracking solution. So where you've got things like Sentry and friends of the show, Honey Badger, that are built as like generic things that can be used for different languages and different frameworks, front end, back end. This Flare is basically a Laravel specific thing. And as you and I have discussed previously on our other podcast, doing Laravel specific things lets you really niche down and focus on the things that you can offer because you're focusing specifically on that. So one key thing, and it's included in the default Ignition, and it's free. So Flare is a paid application or paid SaaS.
right.
But one thing you can do right out of the box with Ignition is to share those error pages, and they get essentially pushed up to Flare, and you get a obfuscated URL, probably using hash IDs. I wonder if they're storing the
Probably.
hash in the database, right?
I
But
bet
you
they
can
are.
say, I want to share this exception. It'll push it up to Flare. It'll give you a URL, and you can decide like what tabs you want to show on it. So you can hide things. You've got an admin link, so once someone's looked at it, you can delete it, so it doesn't get found out or whatever. And you can say, hey, I'm having this exception. Can you take a look at it? And rather than taking a screenshot of it or copy pasting or whatever, you can just send whoever you're working with a link to that, and it's ready for them to review, and then they can have a look at it. So this would be really good, in the context of Laracast or working with remote developers and things like that. So that's one key thing that I really like about that from a collaborative point of view. The other thing, I don't know, we're talking about Flare, and we'll talk more about that. Hopefully, we can get Marcel and Freek on the show at some stage to
We've
talk
been
about
trying
this
to
specifically.
forever. We've been
Yeah.
trying to just make it happen. Yeah.
But the other thing, if you've got Laravel Telescope installed, this will actually hook into Telescope and take you to the request itself, so you can see in Telescope what information it has about the request, and follow along that way as well. So those are two, I think, fairly key things on top of the solutions. Again, because it's a Laravel specific thing, Whoops was really good in terms of like making it easy to find things, but now we can not only really easily find things, but we can also really point out solutions, and there's fixes, and the
Correct.
fixes
Yeah.
allow you to essentially go, yeah, cool, I forgot to generate my app key. So you click a button right from the Whoops page, and it'll generate the app key for you, and then you just refresh the page and off you go. You can configure it to open your editor, so you can say I'm using PHP Storm or Sublime or Vim or whatever, and you can go through the stack trace, and you can click on the little pencil icon. It'll pop the file open in your editor on that line, and you can just fix it straight away. So there's a lot of convenience things in there, and a lot of functionality and power that's available because it's focusing specifically on Laravel and fixing problems
Yeah.
with Laravel applications. So it's included by
Right. Focus.
default with Laravel 6. I think it's available all the way back to Laravel 5.5. You can install it into your older applications as well. So definitely
Yeah.
check it out. Great work to Marcel, to Freek, and both of their teams. So it's not just been the two of them. It's been, all of the team at Sparsy and all of the team at Beyond Code that have been working heads down on this, and they put out a really polished, tool. And as you said,
Right. So
Whoops was really nice before, but this is, it's a view layer on top of Whoops. So there was a little bit of misconception, I think, on Twitter that this was somehow replacing Whoops. This is built on top of Whoops, and so you'll find that Whoops is still installed in your application. Ignition won't work without it, and it just leans on that to give you a lot of the stuff, and then tailors a lot of the bits and pieces specific for Laravel needs.
Yeah, so I think really, what this is trying to do is it's focusing not on the problem necessarily, but like on the solution, right? So it's not just
Yeah.
like throw up in your face and like, here it is, like deal with it. It's like, hey, very friendly guide to say, here are some things that you might try. I think this speaks so much to what our community is all about. which is we want to be very approachable, right? So this is extremely helpful for the experienced developer, but it's also very welcoming to the new developer, right? So this is something that Matt talked about at Laracon US in New York City. He's got this on-ramp idea, right?
Mhm.
Which is basically how do you get new developers started? This is an amazing tool for new developers. So there are a lot of little things that, as an experienced Laravel developer, you might say, "Oh yeah, I forgot to run config clear" or something like that,
Mhm.
right? You just
Mhm.
know because you've ran into the problem enough times and had to debug it yourself that you just know some of the things you always run through in your head. Did I do this? Did I do that?
Yeah.
Did I run composer update? Did I run dump auto load? What are the things that you kind of run through? And so this package really helps to um, help new developers as they try to figure some of these common solutions out to problems that we've all had before. So,
Yeah.
yeah, major
And
props.
with the help of us older states people, it's only going to get better because the things that we come across that don't have a solution for, we're gonna PR the solutions ourselves, and we're gonna improve things for everyone by adding these
Absolutely.
extra solutions. So definitely check it out. I think there's gonna be a lot of work, a lot of functionality added over time for this, and kudos to the team for putting it all together.
Yep. Okay. So the next thing that we have, and it's your turn on this one,
Yeah.
eloquent subquery enhancements in Laravel 6.
Yes, guest posted by Jonathan Rennick. And if you've followed Jonathan for any period of time, if you've seen him speak at Laracon US this year, if you've seen him tweet, if you saw him speak at Laracon online, you know that he's a big fan of pushing more work in Laravel applications to the database layer. Doing more work in the database, we can often reduce the number of queries that we make, reduce the amount of memory that the application uses, and reduce the amount of time required by Eloquent to process our models, which can result in some very significant performance wins. One really good way to push more work to the database is by using subqueries, which allow you to run nested queries within another database query. This can be a powerful way to retrieve ancillary model data without making any additional database queries when it's not possible to do it via a relationship. And you can also use subqueries and order by statements, where statements, and other database clauses.
Who knew?
So, yeah. So, Jonathan
Seriously.
made reference to a couple of query builder macros that he'd been using in his applications to make it easier to use subqueries in Laravel. And he has since submitted 3 pull requests to the Laravel to have it added to the core framework. So here's an overview of each of those 3. First, we've got the select subqueries, then we've got order by subqueries, and then we've got from subqueries. So the select subqueries add support for subqueries to both the select and add select query builder methods. So imagine that you've got a table of flight destinations and a table of flights to destinations. The flights table contains an arrived at column which indicates when the flight arrived at the destination. Using the new subquery select functionality in Laravel 6, you can select all of the destinations and the name of the flight that most recently arrived at that destination using a single query. So Eloquent can be used to generate the subquery, which gives you nice expressive syntax, but you can also do it using the query builder with these changes. So there's basically a add select, and then essentially you use the add select method. You give it an array of key values, and then so the key is last flight, for example, and then the value is another query, and Laravel and Eloquent and the query builder under the hood will take care of converting that to a subquery for you. In addition to select subqueries, we've got the order by subqueries, which makes it possible to use subqueries in the query builder's order by method. Continuing on from the previous example with flights and destinations, you can use it to sort the destinations based on when the flight last arrived at that destination. And as with selects, you can do this with a query builder directly to create a subquery. So you can even do that if you wanted to order users based on their last login date, for example. And lastly, we've got the from subqueries, which makes it possible to use subqueries with the query builder's from method, which are sometimes called derived tables. For example, you may want to calculate the average total donations made by your users in your application. In SQL, it's not possible to nest aggregate functions, for example, to wrap a sum inside an average, but instead you can use a subquery to calculate it. It's probably not something that you're going to do every day, but when you do need it, it is very, very valuable. There is a breaking change to be aware of if you're using Eloquent outside of Laravel, and that's a signature change to the table method in the capsule manager. So nothing to worry about too much if you're using it in the context of Laravel, but if you are using Eloquent in separate applications, something to be mindful of. As we said at the top of the post or of this section, if you're interested in learning more about the subqueries and other advanced database queries, make sure you check out Jonathan's blog and also his Laracon US talk from this year, which we will link up in the show notes, as well as the video course that he's working on called Eloquent Performance Patterns. The goal of that course is to teach Laravel developers how to drastically improve the performance of their Laravel apps by pushing more work to the database layer and still using Eloquent. So be sure to join the mailing list for that if you're interested, which we will link to in the show notes as well. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, so like a lot of these situations is where you'll end up with something where you have to select a bunch of records out of the database, and then you have to fall back to like collection methods, right?
Yeah.
At that point.
Mm-hmm.
So you're saying, hey, we need all these values, and then I have to, go ahead and grab the averages for me. But then after that, I need to sum all of them, right? So you have to fall back on this collection method, logic that you're doing. What Jonathan showed at his talk is that that's fine, even if you don't have any n+1 queries, whatever. It's not going to be necessarily, we think that if we get rid of all the n+1 queries, we're fine. The problem is you have to load all of these things into memory, hydrate all of these models, and then do that. And
Yep.
basically what he's saying here is no longer do you have to do that work in your application or on the processor and the RAM of your application. You can say, hey, database, you're really smart at figuring out how this works. I want you to do this work for me. And then the database will optimize that query itself. We'll go do all those selects, all those joins kind of behind the scenes and return you results much faster than your application could and much more efficiently. So when you find yourself in that situation where you're like, I just don't know. I don't know if I can actually make this happen in the database. Probably can't. And this is probably a situation where you need to go look at Jonathan's course, go buy it when it comes out. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
Jonathan's awesome. Okay. There's that. We've got not a whole lot left here. Let me take a look at our list. We've got Laracast. So Laracast, yeah, 3 more things. Laracast has a new series called What's New in Laravel 6, where shockingly they go through what's new in Laravel 6. We have a quick tutorial about running make auth in Laravel 6. I'm assuming this is also talking about kind of the UI, which we touched on when we talked about Laravel 6, which is that you have to install a new package before you can run that. And so no big deal. Then there's also some talks and photos from Laracon US 2019, which we will link up in the show notes. We had some people, Ninja Parade, Yaz, taking photos there. Bill Kondo, Maverick on Twitter, also has a Laracon 2019 set on Flickr. Both of these guys are extremely talented photographers. Really thankful to have them as a part of the community, and they do a great job every year taking photos. In addition, we have a Laracon US 2019 playlist on YouTube, which shows all the most current list of videos that are available. So the talk format was slightly shorter this year, around 20 or 30 minutes each. So you can rip through a couple of these over your lunch period. So you just kind of click play on the playlist and away you go. I think that's the last 3 items we have there. And
not mentioned, not mentioned on this talks and photos post from Laracon US, but also thanks to Bill Kondo, we have some interviews. I don't know that they were with all of the speakers, but I think he got to most of them. Be sure to keep your eyes on the Laravel News podcast RSS feed or in your podcatcher of choice, and you'll start to see those filtering out throughout this week.
Awesome. Okay, I think that wraps it up. This was episode 90. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any questions or comments, hit us up at Michael Dorinda, at Jake Bennett, at Laravel News. You can find show notes for this episode at laravel-news.com/podcast/90. As always, if you do like the show, please feel free to rate it up or share it with your friends. We would really appreciate that.
And be sure to
so
check
many
out
cool things.
Show sponsor instantdomains.com.
Absolutely. Thank you, Instant Domains. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See y'all.
Bye. Are we live? Are we still doing this?